tech is all okay. So good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. Good morning, people of LinkedIn. Good morning, LinkedIn friends. Good morning if you are watching live on YouTube. Got a new YouTube channel, partly because the tech into LinkedIn can be a little bit glitchy at times. So I'm like, do you know what? I need to bite the bullet and lean more into YouTube. But good morning, everybody. If you are watching us live. You know, I've just spotted your lovely photo in the back, Shivani. That's really thrown me. That's really beautiful.
Oh, thank you. It was 10 years ago. It's like feels crazy now. We had our 10-year anniversary this year, and yeah, I mean,
Wow.
my daughters look at that photo and say, "Mummy, it looks nothing like you." I'm like, "What? I have not changed at all. What do you mean?"
Yeah, it's beautiful. I'm guessing you get asked about it a lot, right? When you come onto calls, if people haven't seen it before, they're like, "What an amazing!"
Yeah, it's kind of like a nice icebreaker, if I'm honest.
Yeah,
You know, especially for meeting somebody new. I like that as well. You know, when you spot something in someone's background, you learn a little bit more about them as well, which I think is always really nice.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
something else to talk about, because I feel like in this hybrid world, especially, things can feel a little bit formal, like you have a meeting agenda and you can often go straight into it. And actually bringing a little bit of yourself, I guess, which is what we're talking about today.
Definitely, yeah. And good morning, Junior Beeman. Good morning, Junior. You're always the first. I didn't even say, if you're watching this live, please do say good morning in the chat. Let us know what sort of week you've had, maybe, if you're watching live. Good morning, Junior. Let's put the A in Friday. Let's do that. But I love what you were saying, Shivani, actually, about the backgrounds, because I've noticed a lot more. I want to say, like, a lot more organizations, I think, are using like branded backgrounds, or it's becoming the norm. I feel like when the pandemic first happened, people were just getting used to it, almost like doesn't matter what the background looks like, and there might be kids running around in the background. And, you know, we had that very famous journalist that presented us being interviewed, with the kids, right? And then the wife comes in and drags one of them out.
God, that was awful.
Right. So, but I feel like we've almost like gone too far the other way now, where everybody, like, almost like, regardless of whether the background looks tidy, neat, whatever, everybody's now using like a fake background or a stage background.
Yeah, or just blurred background. I think I see that a lot.
Yeah.
I agree. I do feel like, it's shifting, isn't it? Like, from how accepting, I guess, we were in, like, actually it's just a mess and whatever, and life is just here. Actually trying to again get a bit more professional. I haven't caved in, so if you come onto a call with me and it's a blurred background, call me out on it. So, Shivani, you have changed.
Yeah, I'm absolutely the same, and my backgrounds are actually quite busy, but that is, this is the space that I record and, sort of do this in is like, it's our shared home office, right, between me and my husband. So it's just, you're just seeing the busyness of our lives in the background, right? Anyway, Shivani, I haven't even introduced you, Shivani. We've just been chatting away. We've gotten into the topic already. So good morning if you're joining us. I am joined by the incredible Shivani Uberoi, founder of the Wallflower Academy. We'll maybe get into how you came up with that name. TEDx speak. You got a TEDx. What's your TEDx talk called again, Shivani? I meant to check that.
Will screw you up.
Nice. Why fitting in will
very on point with the conversation today.
Yeah, definitely. So you are a leading voice on authenticity, inclusion, and psychological safety at work. Over a decade of experience spanning finance, so close to my heart, where I started as well. Gender equity and inclusive leadership. You bring heart, neuroscience, and storytelling into every space you enter. And Shivani's not only launched 3 thriving employee networks at Sky when you were at Sky, but has also inspired audiences from the House of Lords to corporate boardrooms. And according to ChatGPT, who wrote your introduction, Shivani,
I was wondering who wrote this. I was like, I like this intro. I'm going to steal it.
Your mission is simple, which is to create workplaces where people no longer have to shrink to succeed.
Oh, I love it. Thank you, ChatGPT.
Yeah, well done, ChatGPT. You've earned your subscription today. Junior has said here, right, blurred backgrounds discriminate against my bald head's real backgrounds all the way.
Yeah.
Junior, you crack me up,
My husband
honestly.
has that problem too.
Yeah. Does it like
It kind of merges into one almost. Yeah. Yeah.
right?
He's not a fan.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not a fan either. I really don't do it. Okay, so let's get into this. So this is a little bit of I did a season of in the light of all of the noise around DEI and almost as a response to the acronym being used in all sorts of ways and people assuming that DEI means all sorts of different things. I thought let's break this down. So it was like over the new year, I sort of like did a season of redefining DEI and launched
Mm,
into what different things mean, etc. But the one that kind of kept coming up, and it's something that actually at last year's ERG Leader Summit, there was a real debate around it, the extent to which you should bring your whole self to work and what authenticity means. Because I think for employee networks in particular, who, and obviously that's your background as well. So employee networks often are about helping individuals feel that they can be themselves,
mm,
right, in the workplace. So employee networks sort of play that role. So in the event last year, there was this whole debate around, do we really mean like bring your whole self to work? Do we expect people on Zoom calls in their pajamas? And there was
mm,
like the whole thing in terms of like how our appearance, how we
mm,
show up, our
mm.
mannerisms, business etiquette, all of that. So that's part of the reason why I wanted to have this conversation around inclusion. And your name and your profile just kind of rose to the top in terms of the people that I thought would be able to have this conversation. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, no, thank you. I mean, I'm writing a book at the moment as well, which I think you know around, which is called Unlocking Authenticity. So I think,
Oh, I
yeah,
didn't know that.
oh, did you not know that? Yeah, I mean,
No.
yeah, it's about 20,000 words in.
Yeah.
I've booked myself a forest retreat next week to actually go and write it. So I think this conversation is
Nice.
coming at a good time. But
Oh,
yeah, as part of
perfect.
that, I have been reaching out to people as well to get their perspective on authenticity
Yeah.
because, like you said,
Yeah.
it's quite nuanced, right? And
Yeah.
it is it is a conversation that can create debate, which I think is really interesting. And I
Yeah.
start in my book with that debate because I think, yeah, you've got to kind of have that debate before then you talk about how you unlock authenticity and be yourself
Yeah.
at work. But yeah, I find it really interesting, like the pajamas comment, because I mean that's the kind of thing that sometimes people say, actually, yeah, I don't want to be on a Zoom call in my pajamas. Well, then that's your authentic self, right? If you
Yeah.
don't want to be on a Zoom call with your pajamas, nobody expects you to do so. So yeah, for me, authenticity isn't about being like the same person like in every like identity or every sphere of your life, right? It's about
Uh-huh.
having the agency, having the choice to kind of show up how I want to show up. So, if I was
Yeah.
like, woke up and I was not feeling great and I was ill and I just wanted to turn up in my PJs to this conversation,
Yeah.
I would want to feel safe that you're not going to judge me and say, actually, maybe you're not the inclusion expert that I thought you were because you're wearing PJs. Like, do I have that psychological safety with you? Will I feel judgment? Will I feel like people who are on this call will suddenly not think I'm credible because I'm
Yeah.
wearing my PJs? Like, should that make a difference? It shouldn't. But on a normal day, I wouldn't wear my PJs because actually, I like to get ready because it makes me feel better about myself. And, I always have a shower before any call and I need a coffee. Those are the two things I need to do. Well, for my husband, for him, it's different. He could quite happily be in joggers and still be able to perform as his authentic self. But
Yeah.
I think for me, yeah, so I think our authentic self will vary depending on who
Yeah.
we are and where we're showing up and yeah, what parts of us we want to shine. Because let's be
Yeah.
honest, we're all layered. We have different
Yeah.
parts of us. I have a lazy
So
part and I also have an ambitious part.
yeah. So let's start with so as you're saying, like we're all laid, we all have different parts to us, which really links in really well with the title of this in terms of this whole bring your whole self to
Mm,
work. So I guess thinking about what you just said there in terms of we have different parts, we're all layered, etc. But I guess what this phrase suggests and
mm,
where people I think start to get confused about it and why it maybe generates debate is people assume that when we therefore say bring your whole self to work, that almost like we should be able to literally show every part at work if we so wish, if that makes sense, right? So almost like every element of who you are and or your interests and or your mannerisms or the way you speak or whatever, there is almost like the debate around, well, do we really mean that somebody can bring everything? So say, for example, just an example, if you've got somebody, say, who when they're in a social setting, they swear like a trooper, right? They swear a lot, you know, lots of F-bombs, etc. Do we mean, therefore, for example, that when they're then in the workplace, say with other colleagues or with clients, say, that they should be allowed to swear like a trooper? Do you know what I mean? And it's, I think this is where this phrase, I think, causes a lot of confusion and backwards and forwards. So what are your thoughts about that in terms of what does it really mean in practice, bring your whole self to work, when we use that term? And is it always realistic, or are there some caveats around it?
Yeah, I think I mean, I'm not sure where I sit, if I'm honest, on the whole self to work. The strapline for my business is creating workplaces where people can be themselves and thrive. And I think like I said before, like we are layered people, so my whole self is layered. And I don't think when we say bring our whole self, we just have to bring our full whole self all the time. But I should be able to bring parts of my whole self that I want to in that situation, if that makes sense. Like, for example, like I'm a mum, right? And at home, like my daughter would say I'm strict, right? And I can be really disciplined, right? My friends would be like, Shivani, what? Like, they've never seen me like raise my voice or get angry, because that's not the way I am, because I don't need to be. But at home, in some situations, I need to assert boundaries. So that part of me is real and authentic. And sometimes in the workplace, I might need to be a bit assertive. But that is still me. I'm not being inauthentic. But with my friends, they don't see that side of me because it's not necessary in that situation. So I kind of feel like we all have different parts of who we are, and I should be able to bring that part to work and not be judged for it and have consequences. um the swearing one I do find interesting, to be honest, because again, I hear examples like that all the time. And yeah, actually, does being your authentic self mean I can just be a twat because that's who I am? But then I feel like that's a bigger problem if you're a twat, like if you're actually disrespecting people, then of course nobody's going to encourage that, because we don't want your whole self to be a bad self. So, some versions of it I've heard is bring your best self to work, which, maybe is a nicer phrase. But yeah, I think like fundamentally, like the crux of it is we shouldn't have to hide parts of who we are, and because we feel like we will be judged for it. Like, drinking alcohol is an example I always use, because I feel like a lot of people can relate to that, especially in the corporate world. I don't know what your experience was, but when I first joined, like alcohol was a big part of the social culture. And I know many people, including myself, but many people, from all different backgrounds, just the diverse group of people you can think of, everybody's had an experience where they have drunk alcohol when they didn't want to fit in, so not to be judged, not to be called boring, whether that's in a social setting. But it happens a lot in the corporate workplace, and I talk about that in my book as well, because I feel like those are conversations we don't really have. And when we have these conversations, we go straight down the EDI lens. And as a brown person, as a neurodiverse person, and yes, those experiences also are real and they matter. And again, it's layered, right? So somebody from a different heritage in a workplace which is predominantly white might feel more compelled to hide parts of who they are. And that is something that does happen. But at the same time, there's also these social norms and workplace norms around alcohol, extrovertism, and those type of things, which also just creates this kind of culture where, yeah, people do feel like if I am myself, there will be consequences. And I think you asked, is it realistic? And I think that's where the interesting conversation also happens, because I could be myself, but then does that mean I won't get that promotion because, I'm not doing what I need to do? I'm not building my personal brand. I'm not being seen to be a leader. And, that phrase used to be thrown around a lot, like 10, 15 years ago. Like, are you seen to be a leader, like having leadership potential? But then when you break that down, what does that actually mean? I know I said a lot there, so I'll pause.
No. Let me just write that last one down. Are you seen to be a leader? In terms of something that you said that I think was quite interesting, because you've talked about the different parts. We all have different parts to
Mm.
us, and there is a question around almost like, what's the reason that we can't show some of those parts at
Mm.
work? And actually, if it's because, as you said, if it's because we feel that we're going to be judged negatively,
Mm.
um, then maybe that's where it starts to be problematic, and we really have to think
Mm.
about whether the environment is
Exactly.
is is
Yeah.
safe enough to do that, right? Especially if it's a part of our personality that, you said something before, so it's not an aspect of our personality that is disrespectful to others, or is causing any harm to others,
Mm.
or anything like
Exactly.
that.
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely, in terms of, if we're suppressing elements of who we are, and there's this amazing term covering, which I know
Yeah.
is something you've delved into as well. It's a piece of research that I really love. But yeah, if there's
Mm.
if we're hiding something because we think it's stigmatized, or it's negative, or it plays into a stereotype, and we think, as you said, oh, maybe I won't get on
Yeah.
in this organization if I show that real side of myself, then that is problematic, right? I think
Yeah.
is what you're
Exactly.
saying. Yeah.
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 And I think that's when it comes down to the environment.
Yeah.
It comes down to leadership, creating that culture where, differences are celebrated, and actually, they're
Yeah.
themselves also being authentic. Like my book, I'm actually writing for leaders, because I think, leaders create that culture. They have a big influence on that psychological safety. But really
Yeah.
interestingly, like leaders, most of them cover themselves. And I've interviewed leaders
Yeah.
in my book where, and even that covering research as well, that Deloitte did a really big two parts research,
Yeah.
and they found leaders actually cover themselves, and
Yeah.
straight white men cover, which is why, again, this
Yeah.
is not an EDI conversation. Like, it obviously
Yeah.
feeds into it, but this is not a strictly EDI conversation. This is about
Yeah.
workplace culture. And yeah,
Absolutely.
like the conversations I've had with leaders have been really interesting about, mental health, showing weakness, showing emotion.
Yeah.
Those are the areas where a lot of them cover,
Yeah.
especially as they got more senior. And
Yeah.
mental health is a big one, right?
Yeah.
COVID destigmatized it to a degree, but did it really? How comfortable are leaders showing vulnerability in the workplace and say they're suffering, and not feel like they're then being stigmatized and not seen to be capable, not seen to be able to do their job or competent. So
Yeah.
yeah, that bit's really, I think, really, really important,
Yeah.
because as we do get more senior, we have more influence on the culture, and I feel like, leaders do have a responsibility to create that environment where people can be themselves and then thrive,
Yeah.
and feel comfortable
Yeah.
to do that, rather than just, stick it on a wall and say, be yourself.
Yeah. Time to talk, all that stuff.
Yeah, I
What's
literally,
it?
yeah.
It's really interesting. Anybody that hasn't come across this covering work that we're talking about, maybe if we can remember, what one of us will hopefully drop the link
Mm,
into
I'll
something.
put it in
But
the chat.
it's this
Mm,
fantastic piece of work that a guy called Kenji Yoshino did with Deloitte, first
mm,
in 2013, and then there's been an update in
yeah,
2023,
yeah,
which, as you say, Shivani, I think the thing that stood out for me in that research was the spotlight on senior leaders, and how
yeah,
actually, when you normalize for other things, it's senior leaders almost that are covering the most, right?
yeah.
Which I thought
So
was really
interesting.
interesting.
Yeah,
So there is, the question that I've got is, what can leaders and managers do to kind of create more of a sort of genuine psychological safety? What is the role specifically of leaders and managers? And then I will get on to Junior's question here as well about judgment. So what should leaders and managers be doing in this space?
I think, yeah, being vulnerable, and sharing parts of who they
Yeah.
are. And we talk about psychological safety and how important it is for people to, show up, speak up, and actually, most people look to leaders kind of to be those role models. And
Yeah.
as leaders, talking about your mistakes, talking about, because we all make mistakes in life, in workplaces. I remember when I was in finance, I made a lot of mistakes. Probably why I left. But some were like quite chunky material,
Yeah.
£500,000. And
Yeah.
sometimes I felt I could talk about it, and other times I felt compelled to actually just try and like figure it out myself. And actually, as I became more senior, I talked about them because I think it's important, because I wouldn't want anybody working in my team feeling like they can't speak up and share that. So I think as a leader, we have to normalize these things. We've got to normalize being different, making mistakes, having different parts of us, mental health, all of these things. It's trying to normalize difference. I think
Yeah.
is a power that leaders really do have, and not all of them, I guess, really understand it. Like when I do a lot of work with
Yeah.
leaders, and some of them are actually quite shocked when we talk about their leadership shadow and the shadow that they cast when they walk into a room, and actually
Yeah.
how that can influence the whole dynamic of the room and whether people will speak up or show parts of who they are. Because you talked about ERGs, and I'm sure we'll talk about it a bit more depth, but often people are themselves in the ERG setting, and then they go into a meeting with the senior leader, and they're a different person again. That to me is not a
Yeah.
healthy workplace culture. Like, the person should be able to feel safe to be themselves in that meeting room as well.
Yeah.
And I think a leader has a big influence on that.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I guess there's something about when we think about the things that maybe stop people from being themselves, which actually links to Junior's question around fear of rejection and fear of judgment. There's
Mm.
something about how leaders respond to difference.
Yeah.
How leaders respond when people do show up or share things, and it's not like the norm. So, for example, going back to the example that you talked about in terms of, say, for example, a drinking culture.
Mm.
So, where there is something like that, where, for example, every social event is centered around alcohol or whatever, there's almost something about what is it that leaders and managers do in those scenarios, or even leading up to those situations, actually to kind of almost like break that stigma, such that even
Mm.
if you don't want to participate in that, you're still included. Do you know what I mean? So, and
Yeah, I mean, they set the tone, right, on what's
yeah,
normal. Exactly.
exactly.
So it's like if you're
Yeah,
having workplace drinks, having non-alcoholic options and making that normal. So people
yeah,
don't feel like they have to even ask for it, because it's just there. The beers
yeah,
and wines are there, and so on, non-alcoholic options.
yeah,
And I think the leader will set the tone for that, saying that's the way we are. That's what we encourage.
yeah,
And then that should filter down into the people who are actually organizing the event, etc. So
yeah,
I think everyone's busy at work, and this is like an issue where I think more leaders need to like pause and think about these things, because often you'll find it's not that they don't want to, but they haven't thought about it. So actually
mm,
pausing, reflecting, before a meeting, before a social, and thinking about these things until it then
yeah,
becomes normalized, I think is really,
yeah,
really important. But
yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
just set the tone on what is normal, how difference is accepted. But
Yeah,
also, if we go into I guess Junior's question as well on fear
mm,
of rejection paired with fear of judgment. A lot of what people talk about in this space is actually, if I don't mask, if I don't assimilate to a certain type of
yeah,
person, I won't be promoted, I won't progress. And you commented on that earlier as well. And actually, how do we first make that not true? How do we make sure that people's skills are the things that are being judged when it comes to promotion, and not
mm,
these other things? And then how do we celebrate that, and how do we role model that, so people also know that you can be different? I'll tell you a story, actually, which is really interesting. uh, Happened about 10-15 years ago. So I had a senior
uh-huh,
leader come talk to us. It was a group of, I don't know, 20-30 of us. I was a bit
yeah,
junior in my career at that point, and we were doing the colors exercise. Have you done the colors exercise where
yeah, like your insight
insight?
colors, like,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
So we did that, and he then spoke in front of all of us, and he said that he is a red, which is,
mm-hmm,
more assertive and
mm,
etc. And he said he used to be a blue green, but he said over his career he has shifted himself to be more red, because those are the leadership qualities that you need.
right,
And I sat there thinking, like, wow, like, honestly, I was yellow, right? And sunshine yellow, not very blue or
yeah,
green. Again,
Yeah.
hence I left finance going, oh,
Yeah.
everything's still green around me, maybe I'm the wrong place. But yeah,
Yeah.
I've even felt like I need to be a bit more red in some situations, but he was standing there and he was telling us that when he had an opportunity to actually be himself, be a leader and say, actually, I am more blue and green, and that, that's celebrated because we need different types of people, we need different
Yeah.
types of skills. And actually, there are different ways of lead. You don't have to be assertive,
Mm.
you can lead with empathy. And we have moved on from there. We talk about empathetic leadership and emotional intelligence and how important that is in leadership, but we're probably not there yet in celebrating that as a leadership trait or even role modeling it. I think leaders will still feel compelled to cover that parts of who they are. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, that's just an example of where I feel like, yeah,
Yeah.
he had an opportunity. But it's also, quite sad that he felt like he had to conform and become more red.
Yeah.
And had he not, would he have got promoted?
Yeah. And well, as you were talking there's something about cultural norms as well,
Mm,
right? So
yeah.
leadership in the West and kind of like Anglo
Mm,
kind of file countries does tend to be more extroverted,
yeah.
as you say, more red,
Mm,
more sort of like, the charismatic leader, all of that kind of thing. Which, I think that does put pressure on individuals to have and I've actually seen it a lot in finance in particular, because a lot
mm,
of individuals in finance do tend more towards introversion, so they
mm,
tend to be more introverted, but actually Western leadership tends to demand a more extroverted style
mm.
of personality. So I've definitely seen it with a lot of CFOs who actually probably would rather just be stuck behind their desk with the door closed,
Yeah.
right, and then forced to kind of be this more kind of slightly gregarious, more outward, sort of
Yeah.
like facing, to progress. So I think there
Which is then
definitely
exhausting, isn't
something.
it? Because you're going against your, like, core
Yeah,
self and,
absolutely. Yeah,
being this, like,
yeah,
big person. And yeah,
yeah,
and again, I've had
yeah,
conversations with many people on how
yeah,
exhausting that is to show up
yeah,
and try and mold into this extrovert, because that
yeah,
is what gravitas is, and they need to have
yeah,
gravitas to be a leader, so they're almost molding
absolutely.
themselves.
Yeah, and it probably links back to it kind of links back to the bit around the covering maybe, and why we see it so much in senior leadership in particular. When you think about particularly in because I think I'm right in saying that a lot of the covering work um focuses probably quite heavily on like US
Yes.
organizations,
Yeah.
UK, Australia, Canada, etc. And so
Yeah.
we all, you only need to look at the leadership of the countries, right? So you
True.
look at the political leadership, and that
Yeah.
that tells you what type of leadership we tend to value in these countries. So just pulling in Cecilia's point here as well. Good morning, Cecilia.
Oh,
The
hello.
cultural intelligence piece here is really important. It shapes how people lead, but it also creates clamorous faux pas. Um, and then,
Yeah, cultural intelligence is really important. I think, because people have different norms, right? I'll just
yeah,
give you a really basic example. I was on a tube yesterday
sure.
going into London,
Yeah,
and there was somebody sitting opposite us listening to a phone, and it was loud music, like not headphones, right? And he was
right.
there and he was chilling. And then I heard the music was Bollywood music, right? So he was clearly from India, I think. And
Yeah,
then me and my husband were sitting there, and I'm one who gets really like agitated with noise, right?
yeah,
But then me and my husband had a conversation that for him, that's probably normal because I think in India that's what they do. Really interestingly, on the way home, we were on a tube again, and there were two ladies, also Indian, again listening to music really loud. And it's like clearly it's just a cultural norm for them, right? And I
right.
can tell them that actually that's not what we do here. Right here we have to have headphones, right? That's not what we
uh,
do. But actually, is that the right thing? I don't know. Like obviously a tube setting potentially is respect each other's um privacy, that type of thing. But I thought
yeah,
it was just interesting that for them, they didn't feel like they were doing anything wrong, because for them in their culture that is
yeah,
really that's their normal. And I think
yeah,
that's the thing, like we all have a different version of normal, and cultural intelligence definitely comes into that.
yeah,
And that can be eating with our hands. I had a conversation a few weeks ago with a lady who said for her it's normal
yeah,
to eat with her hands, but she would not dare do that
yeah,
at work. She would not do it. because she
Yeah.
will be judged, and she knows she will be judged. But again, that is her cultural norm. And actually, could we
Yeah.
be a bit more understanding? Like you said before, if it's not disrespecting somebody or hurting anybody, then actually, yeah, why are we, I guess, putting pressure on for people to
Yeah.
assimilate to a cultural norm within an
Yeah. And
organization?
it is really complex. I think it actually links back to what Junior was saying as well about the fear of rejection, because I think there's something like on a human level. So even like
Mm,
ignoring just the maybe the progression in an organization, but on a
mm,
human level, there is that psychological thing of I have to fit into the group,
yeah.
I have to fit into the tribe. Otherwise, you fit in or you die, right? Is
Well,
the
yeah, yeah.
is
It's
the
yeah,
evolution of it
exactly.
that
Yeah.
that makes us think that we have to conform. But I think going back to we can talk about the whole fitting in thing, but when you said about the managers and leaders, I think there's something about how do they create a culture that really celebrates difference, because actually when you think about the business case for diversity, which is
Mm,
around the innovation and getting different ideas and divergent thinking and all of that, and I'm really delving into divergent thinking at the moment.
mm,
The way that you can do that is to really, you've got to really encourage difference, like you've got to
mm.
really
Encourage
almost
and
like
celebrate, right?
celebrate 100%. Yeah,
Like through
yeah,
storytelling, through cultural celebrations. I know
yeah,
ERGs, they probably have a big part to play in that, but it shouldn't be their job to do it. But where
yeah,
ERGs are, because they tend to do it mainly in the organizations where they are holding cultural celebrations or storytelling. I love
yeah,
storytelling. Then actually
yeah,
the leaders firstly show up to the ERG sessions firstly,
yeah,
and yeah, take part, advocate for them, normalize it, because I think that sends a powerful message as well. When
yeah,
a senior leader has turned up to an ERG session and is visible and is vocal and is celebrating that, that's all part of normalizing our differences and yeah, who we are, whether that's cultural differences or
yeah,
neurodiverse differences, whatever they are. I think storytelling is a brilliant way
yeah,
to share our differences, but then yeah, it needs to then be accepted and celebrated. And I think that's where leadership comes in. And when they start telling their stories, remember when I was at Sky, like a big pivotal moment was when one of our really senior leaders on the exec board
mm,
stood up and talked about his mental health journey. And I think that was the moment it got destigmatized, rather than all
yeah,
the other stuff that we were doing, because actually the power that he had to share his story, I think just made a massive difference. So yeah, I think leaders
yeah,
sharing their stories, being vulnerable, I think, yeah, super, super
absolutely.
important.
Yeah, definitely. And adding on here to what Cecilia is saying, the power of cognitive diversity will be the difference between businesses who are agile and resilient and those who fall behind and fail. And there is this thing about in terms of how you, it's the whole like, and it links to the bringing your whole self to work, but the way that whether it's managers or team leaders and facilitators, you know, navigate work and create, whether it be meetings or, problem solving or events or
Mm,
whatever, where that cognitive diversity can come out. And there
mm,
is a skill actually to facilitation of good meetings, right? Such
mm,
that everybody's voice is heard, such to
mm.
encourage people to think differently, etc. It
Well,
really is a
there's this.
skill.
Yeah, it really is a skill. There's this stat that I always come back to. I'm not going to remember it exactly, but it's essentially like if somebody speaks within the first 5 minutes of a meeting, they're more likely to contribute later on. And
Yeah,
it's really, really important, because I would go back to the days where I used to work in corporate environment and most things were in person. And I remember going into a meeting room, and that's when you have the small talk, right? And if you don't feel like you're fitting into that conversation, I remember it impacting how I then showed up later on.
yeah,
And you could definitely see a different dynamic in the room, where somebody else had already been chatting to the senior leader about whatever, the football at the weekend or whatever it
yeah.
was, and then I hadn't said anything. And I don't know about you, but the longer you go in a meeting and you haven't spoken, you're just like, I haven't
It
said anything.
gets
I haven't said
worse.
anything.
Yeah,
It gets worse, yeah. And then when you do say something, you're like, oh my God, now this has to be really good. And then
yeah,
while, the person sitting next to me, he's just saying this, that, and the other. Not all of it even is, great ideas, but he feels so
yeah,
comfortable to say it because he's got that
yeah,
bond with the person. So
yeah,
yeah, that's a stat I always share with leaders. Actually, what can you do, like you said, or whoever's
yeah,
facilitating the meeting?
yeah,
Do something at the beginning of the meeting where actually you're involving everybody, and
yeah,
then they're more likely to contribute. And yeah, and then yeah, the whole
yeah.
business case for diversity kind of feeds into that. I think, you're likely to be
Yeah.
more innovative because you get more ideas, you get more challenge.
Yeah.
So yeah,
And
all of that I think is really important.
absolutely. Yeah. And encouraging it and explicitly saying, we're looking for different ideas, different
Yeah.
thinking to this problem, and not sort of going straight for the solution is
Yeah,
really
yeah,
important.
exactly that. Yeah, there's ways of doing it. Like, actually, I
Yeah.
want you to break down this idea. Like, give me all
Yeah.
the reasons why this is a bad idea. Because I remember the senior leader once said to me, I was way more confident by now. He said in my development chat that what he liked about me was that I used to challenge him. He goes, he's so used to people around him say, yes, 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 that's a great idea, even though when it's a shit idea. And he goes, I know I come up with some shit ideas. He was very radical thinking. So some stuff he would come out with just would not make sense and it was not
Yeah.
practical. I would call him out on it, but I had a relationship with him because I'd been working with him for a long time and I felt confident
Yeah.
to do that. And he'd obviously created the psych safety. But yeah, it was interesting that he said that he valued that because he's like, you call it out. Well, all the other
Yeah.
people are like, oh yeah, yeah, that's a great idea when it's not.
Yeah.
So actually, yeah,
Exactly.
as a leader, like you just said, encouraging that and celebrating it. And that gave me more confidence to do it again, to be honest, because sometimes I
Yeah.
would feel a bit like, everyone's saying it's great. Should I say it's great? I'm like, actually, I think it's not great. But yeah, as soon as he told me
Yeah.
that he valued that,
Yeah.
and he didn't always agree with me, and sometimes he would show me why it's great. I wasn't always right. I was usually right, but
Yeah.
not always right. But yeah, the fact that he celebrated it gave me more
Yeah.
confidence to do it, not only with him but with other people.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, one of the things I want to get onto before we like wrap things up, I can't believe it's 35 minutes already. It feels like we've only
How
been
long was
speaking
this
for
in for?
5 minutes.
45.
30 minutes. I
Oh well,
normally say 30 to 40 minutes is what we
okay,
normally
that's fine.
try for.
I've
Um,
got a few more
w-
minutes.
One of the things that I wanted to talk about is because you've spoken about it, which is the dangers of fitting in, and
Yeah.
actually, what's really interesting about that covering research is sometimes when I've talked with organizations, you want to get onto the so what is the so what
Mm.
of when we suppress who we are when we come into the workplace. So you've talked about it in terms of dangers of fitting in. What are the signs that people should look out for when they are compromising their authenticity at work? So how does what starts to happen?
I think often it's a feeling, whether it's that feeling of
Yeah.
exhaustion once you've left that meeting and you're like, "Oh, now I can be myself," and you just feel
Yeah.
exhausted. Um, or it can be if you're compromising your values, there can be feelings of shame, and that comes up a lot. And actually, you know, having to act a certain way or behave a certain way or talk,
Yeah.
whatever it is that you felt like you had to do, if it's then compromising your values, you can feel
Yeah.
guilt, you can feel shame. And I talk a lot about values. And I think that for me, that was my trigger when I was like, actually, I'm compromising my values actually to
Right.
to be this person that I think I need to be. And actually, yeah, then prioritizing what matters to me was,
Yeah.
I guess, my moment to realize actually I want to be who I am. And if I can't be accepted for being who I am, then maybe I'm not in the right career or at the right workplace or whatever. But yeah, I think like you know when you're compromising your values, and
Yeah.
yeah, it's often it's a feeling. And in that covering research, Deloitte's research, they talk about impact on self-esteem and impact on
Yeah.
mental health. I'm doing my own research. I have put the survey in the comments, and again, that's like the biggest thing has come up is self-esteem and
Mm.
mental health. And I
Yeah.
talk about this in my TEDx talk when I say that actually when you're being somebody else and you're being accepted for being somebody else, you're telling your true self that
Yeah.
you're not good enough. That really
Yes.
like stays with you. That actually this Shivani is being accepted, which means the real Shivani isn't good enough, and that obviously impacts your
Mm.
self-esteem. And actually, I noticed that in myself as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. Yeah. Gosh, that's so interesting. I'd never really sort of like made that connection, but it makes absolute sense in terms of, yeah, if you're feeling the need to be somebody else, it's
Mm,
because you've either taken it on board or at least for the purpose of the environment that you're in,
mm,
you're saying that there are elements of yourself that aren't good enough to be
mm.
accepted in that space, which yeah, is really quite damaging when you
It
think of
is
it like that,
damaging, yeah.
really. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it is damaging. It's not a short-term impact either.
Yeah.
People are doing this day in and day out, then yeah, that builds, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Which is
So
why my
what is
TEDx
it?
talk was called Why Fitting In Will Screw You Up, basically, because
Yeah.
I think there's only so
It
much
makes
you can do
sense.
it, and then you realize
Yeah.
actually it's not worth it, right? It's
Yeah.
really not worth it.
Yeah. What can individuals do? So if there's somebody watching this, and I'll give you a story in a minute of something I heard recently, but what can individuals do if they think, do you know what, this is me, like I'm not showing up as who I am? What can they do, and what can organizations do? Because as you were giving the story about like the drinking culture and that sort of thing, I
Mm,
remember I was working with a client and we were talking about this very topic, inclusion, and I was talking about covering, etc. And it was to like a group of, I don't know, there were like different cohorts of supervisors and managers that were coming into the training. And somebody explained that they had had some colleagues over from India, from their, they have like offshoring. So some colleagues from India had come over to spend some time with the British colleagues. And the colleagues were drinking alcohol, the colleagues from India, even though it was
right.
against their religion, because they thought that they
Oh,
had to
wow.
almost like to be polite to, and
Oh,
when the
wow.
HR lead heard this, who um who is Hindu, she was like, "What?" She was like absolutely
Wow.
stunned that that's the extent to which people, thought that the lengths people thought they needed to go in to fit in. And what was interesting in the group of managers that I was doing the work with, it took a while for the penny to drop as to why that was problematic. Do you know what I
Really?
mean?
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. They were,
Gosh.
yeah, they were really along. They were quite starting from a low base. Let's just put it like
Wow.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
wow. I mean, that's yeah, that's a sadly, that's an example, not quite to that extent, but yeah, I
yeah,
hear quite a lot where people, yeah, do drink to be accepted. And like you said, it is a
yeah,
human need as well, right? It's
yeah,
evolutionary, it's instinctive that we want to fit in, we want to
yeah,
belong, we want to be part of the pack. So yeah, so I think, yeah, we might do things that we wouldn't normally do, or we might say
yeah,
things we don't really agree with. But yeah, I think that's when, to your question on what can everybody do, is like
yeah,
we all impact the space around us. Yeah, I've talked about leaders and how they have a big influence on culture and a meeting room, for example. But we can all change the dynamic of a room, and
yeah,
we can all impact how somebody else feels. So I think just thinking about our interactions, what we're doing, how we're talking, and all of those small things, they really make a difference.
mm, yeah,
So yeah, slowing down and yeah, just being kind and non-judgmental, like yeah, calling ourselves out on our judgment, right? Because, we've all
yeah,
done it, we all do it. My friends often would tease me. I do drink, but I would often not drink for various reasons, whether it's health or whatever, trying to get pregnant, various reasons in my life. And a lot of my friends would shame me for it. And they're great, but they wouldn't do it to try and shame me. They were like, oh my God, you're so boring or whatever. And I think often people don't realize the impact of their words, actually.
yeah,
And so, yeah, I think, we all have the power to make somebody feel included.
yeah,
So, yeah, like leaning
yeah,
into that, I think is really,
yeah,
really important.
yeah. I agree. I think that we can all play almost like that role of leadership in our
Exactly. All
organizations,
lead,
right? We don't,
exactly,
yeah,
100%.
yeah. We
Yeah.
don't have to, it's
You don't have
great
to have
when
the
the
job
lead,
title. Yeah, exactly. And I
exactly.
think
Yeah,
exactly that. And you see that in workplaces. You might have somebody with the job title of a leader, but then somebody else is actually leading the culture and changing the environment
yeah,
of that room. And really they're
yeah,
doing the leading. So yeah,
yeah,
stepping into your own leadership, I think, yeah, is
yeah.
really, yeah, really powerful.
Amazing. And anything that organizations can do that are maybe just setting out on this journey,
Yeah,
any
I'm a big
practical
fan of
steps they can
ERGs,
take.
obviously. I know you are as well. So I think,
Yeah,
encouraging spaces um, like ERGs, but then also supporting them, showing up for them. They
yeah,
shouldn't be just this silo network on the side of an organization. They need to be integrated, and the exec
yeah,
should show up, the senior leaders should show up. But yeah, supporting ERGs, I think, is a
yeah,
brilliant way to really impact the culture of an organization, and I've seen that happen. So I think that's one of the biggest things. And yeah, encouraging your leadership to be authentic, share their stories, and yeah, just spend a bit more time on a human to human level, like getting to know people.
mm,
Like I think that's
yeah,
really, really important. Like, we've talked about socials, and I'm a big advocate for socials during work hours, which are not alcohol based, right? So I think it's
mm,
so important, especially in this hybrid world, that we are intentional about connection, because actually, when you feel connected to somebody, you're more likely to be
yeah,
yourself, right? And
yeah,
actually, spending time with somebody is essentially the most powerful way to do that. So, team building activities, all of that, they're not just a nice to have.
Yeah.
Actually, I think they're a real integral part of workplace culture.
Yeah.
So prioritize those team building sessions during work hours, make them inclusive.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, you would see your culture radically change.
Yeah. So giving people time and space to like get to know each other
Exactly that.
during the work time. I'm
Yeah.
totally with you. And the whole drinking thing is part of the reason. So for the ERG Leader Summit this year, which is literally just in 3 weeks' time, just under 3 weeks' time, our drinks reception, our networker drinks reception in the evening is totally alcohol free. Not just because I no longer drink, right? That's not. But when we thought about it in terms of inclusion, I know, for example, when I've spoken to some individuals that lead, for example, Muslim networks, and I really talked it through in terms of for something like a networking event, what should it really look like? And they were like, well, really, there shouldn't really be any alcohol being served. Like that's the most that's the most
Inclusive, yeah.
inclusive. And so we thought, you know what, it's just a 1 hour event. People are
Don't
traveling
need
to and
alcohol.
from anyway.
Yeah.
It doesn't need alcohol. So it's a zero alcohol drinks reception.
Well, yeah. Do you want to market with that? Do you think it will impact your attendance? This was the thing that people would say to me at work when we would say, let's not do alcohol. They'd be like, oh no, nobody will turn up. But actually, yeah, people surprise you. Like people are there
No,
for the
I think
connection.
it's I think it's a win-win.
I think it is.
Definitely,
Oh yeah, that
definitely.
sounds
Yeah,
great.
perfect, amazing. Right. Last comment to you, then Shivani. As we wrap things up, where can people find you if they want to? I know you
LinkedIn.
do some freelance stuff as well. LinkedIn
Yeah. Yeah,
and the
LinkedIn is the best
Wallflower.
way to contact me, though I have been quite off it in the last month, to be honest, taking a mental health
Yeah,
break. But I do check
good for
messages. So
you.
yeah,
Yeah,
LinkedIn, or Shivani
and
at wallfloweracademy.co.uk.
why the name the Wallflower Academy? I forgot to
Mm.
ask you that. Why is it called that?
Well, like a wallflower. I don't know if you watched the movie, The Perks of Being a Wallflower. Have
I
you seen that movie? Oh
haven't.
my God,
I
love
know
that
of the
movie.
film, but I haven't watched it. Okay.
It's a brilliant movie. Definitely watch it. It's quite old now. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think for me, and I say this on my website that I spent a lot of my life, not just work life, but life, feeling like a wallflower, on the side,
Okay.
trying to fit in. And
Yeah.
essentially, like my business is all around creating cultures where people can just be themselves. And yeah, I just loved the term the wallflower because I kind of just felt like it
Right.
encompasses everything in terms of what I'm
Yeah.
trying to do.
I love that. I love that. It's a lovely name. And obviously, yeah, from the film, The Perks of Being a Wallflower. So there is
Yes,
something about, you can almost like you can sort of move from a position of relative sort of inconspicuousness, but you can actually do great things, right? From
exactly.
that
Yeah,
position of being a
if you're in the right
wallflower. Yeah.
environment, you will bloom,
Yeah.
right? And that's just why the
Amazing.
environment is
Yeah.
important.
Great. Fantastic. Shivani, thank you so, so much for your time this
Oh,
morning.
thank
What a
you. I enjoyed
tricky
that
topic.
conversation.
I feel like we could have talked about it for much, much
I
longer.
know. There's a lot we didn't
Um,
delve into. But yeah, if anybody has any questions or comments, yeah, do reach out.
yeah.
If you can also complete my survey for the book, that's will be really
Yes.
useful because yeah,
Yeah.
really,
So your
really
survey's in the comments, right?
yeah, I put it in the comments this morning.
Okay.
But yeah,
Perfect.
just want to get
Okay.
lots of different perspectives
Brilliant.
because
Yeah.
like in this conversation, we know it's not an easy topic to talk
Absolutely.
about. It's
Yeah,
quite
definitely.
nuanced.
So yeah, fill in the survey, share it with your employee network or your
Yes.
ERG colleagues as
Yeah.
well,
Amazing.
and with other colleagues at work. That would be
Mm.
great. Shivani, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for everybody that has been listening in live, or if you're watching this on the replay, thank you for taking half an hour or so out of your day to join with us. And that is it. We're at
Thank
the
you,
end of
everyone.
another
Bye.
half-term week. Have a great weekend. Ciao.
Bye.
Right.